Brilliant. Right, it's Carl here from Brrraaains A Head-Banging Life with Ben of, well, the simplest way to put it, doom metal band Khemmis. Ben, thanks for taking the time to speak with us. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me on, my friend. I'm doing all right. I'd say I'm doing pretty well, all things considered. The world's on fire, but I have a home with a wife that I love and a dog that's wonderful and a cat that's wonderful, and we can, at least right now, still afford to keep the lights on and food in our bellies. So I will try to keep my complaints to a minimum.
That's, yeah, you got to find the most positive outlook you possibly can, because it is the elephant in the room. We haven't done an interview in the last 3 weeks that hasn't unfortunately opened with the question, how are you handling basically this global lockdown, and is it massively affecting you?
You know, I mean, in so many ways, yes. Obviously, without touring, that has a pretty tremendous financial impact on any and all professional musicians. Releasing new music during this time is interesting because for a lot of people, their disposable income is tight, if not completely non-existent. And yet, at the same time, I think there's something, for me at least, special about releasing new music during this time because everyone could use a sense of connection with other people. I think everyone can use something to feel hopeful about and sort of strengthened by. And, I'm not saying that our music, does that for every single human in the world, but I do like the idea that, by putting that music out into the world, that you're, contributing to the betterment of people's day-to-day existence, even if it's only for, the 4 minutes or so it takes for them to listen to a song. So trying to sort of maintain that balance.
It's a fantastic way to put it. I conjure up an image as you were talking there of someone out in the world waking up tomorrow, for example, having a bad day. They need that distraction. You have your new EP out, they put that on, and for 20-30 minutes they forget everything. And
Yeah, I think that broadly that's one of the most amazing things about music, maybe about all kinds of art, but for me especially music, is its ability to sort of ground you and help you put things in perspective, and also to be reminded that there are other people, like-minded, well-meaning people in this world who are experiencing, some of the same kind of crap you are, if not all of the same kind of crap that you are.
yeah.
And and I'm sure we'll talk about this, but we certainly didn't anticipate Rainbow in the Dark being quite as relevant thematically as it wound up being. But all the same, I'm not going to complain about the idea of putting something, positive and heartfelt out into the world when there's so much bad news.
Yeah. Yeah. And since your inception, you guys seem to have barely stopped for breath. Is it just a matter of, as a unit, you've like to keep busy?
I don't know if we know any other way to be honest. If we could, we would do this every moment of every day. But there's pesky things like eating and sleeping that get in the way of that. But it's the same kind of thing as well, where like when we're creating music together, like we're creating it first and foremost for ourselves. We're making music that we find compelling, that we think is interesting and reflects where we are. But as more and more people have gotten on board, I think that subconsciously we do sort of feel like it's almost an obligation to not necessarily to like work ourselves to death, for anyone else's sake, but if we are feeling, if we are sort of driven by the power of heavy metal, then we should absolutely be creating and sharing that with other people, because what's the point of doing anything if we're not all aware of the fact that we're in this together?
And it's paying dividends, really, because you have risen through the ranks to be kind of one of those most talked about names in metal. Every new release spoken about with excitement. Was there a specific point that you can think of where that sunk in for you?
I don't know that it's necessarily sunk in yet. It's funny because when you're sort of doing press, And you, you're talking to people that you maybe have not talked to before, especially, excuse me, as we have sort of expanded our international fan base. The question is always, is it just the journalists that know who we are? Or are there people? And then, we see the numbers of downloads and records sold and things, and we're like, wow, there are people in parts of the world that I can't even point to on a map that know who we are and are, sort of moved by our music. So I think it's more of an ongoing sort of realization and appreciation of the fact that what we're doing seems to resonate with folks, and it's pretty awesome.
Well, you certainly earned it. It's not like you released your debut and that was it. It's been a gradual over, the last 8 years.
Yeah, we've been a band for about 8 years now. We released our debut album in 2015. And I mean, and you're right. It's not like we put out Absolution and and then we blew up. Although in our minds we did, because we were like, wow, we put an album out on vinyl and people are buying it. This is amazing. Because we didn't start this band with any expectation of accomplishing anything other than just writing songs that we liked, recording them, and then hopefully figuring out a way to share them with other people. So everything that has happened beyond that has consistently been, a pretty moving and overwhelming experience.
And obviously tomorrow, brand new EP, doomed heavy metal. It's kind of a Khemmis rarities record, right?
Yeah, we approached this by thinking about one of our favorite releases collectively, which is ZZ Top's Fandango. Ooh. And for ZZ Top, that's a release that sort of stands out in their catalog because it's a collection of singles and live tracks. It's not a quote-unquote normal full-length album. And it's such a cool release. Zach actually got us all doing this thing we call Fandango Fridays, where on Fridays, especially when we are all together in the van, but even if not, if we're all by ourselves, we will listen to that record at some point because it's a really, I think of it as a really compelling love letter to ZZ Top's fans and more broadly to rock and roll and the blues, because it channels, it embodies the spirit of that music in a really raw and organic way by sort of casting aside the constraints of a quote unquote normal album. Because there was a time where you'd see more of these sort of non-traditional in between album releases, and that seems to have sort of fallen by the wayside in the last few decades.
Yeah.
And so thinking about that and knowing that we had some material sort of, sitting around that we hadn't put into a proper release with the 2 studio recordings from 2017 and then the live tracks from 2018, we wanted to do something that was special, that stood out, in our catalog from our other releases. But we didn't want to do anything that just felt like we were just throwing a bunch of crap together. And so because we were inspired by ZZ Top and the sort of feelings tied up in Fandango, that informed our choice of the final track to add, which was Dio's Rainbow in the Dark, because it really encapsulates our love of heavy metal and the way that Ronnie James Dio approached his life and approached heavy metal is, I think, a way that we could all learn to approach life and approach our artistic endeavors.
I think it's a fascinating way to describe that, because that's quite an eclectic mix. People who haven't, say, delved into your back catalogue or know you well would be no doubt very surprised to hear you reference ZZ Top and, of course, Dio as your influences into this EP, considering the style of music you play.
Yeah, we're more complicated than people might assume. Especially if people have only seen our album covers, they might assume that we're a bunch of wizard-loving nerds, and they wouldn't necessarily be wrong about that. But there's more to it than just that.
Yeah. So you already mentioned Dio and Rainbow in the Dark. Guess it's kind of the forefront of the EP. Why that song in particular?
Well, again, part of it is what Dio represented and continues to represent to music and to heavy metal. And there's a practical side to it as well, which is it's a pretty simple song. There's really 2 riffs, 2 drum fills. What makes that song so legendary are, of course, Ronnie James Dio's vocal performance and, an incredible guitar solo. So we we knew that we could take this song and sort of make it our own while still very much paying tribute to the original, because we didn't want to do anything that so totally reimagined it that it just stopped sounding like Rainbow in the Dark. People love that song because it sounds like that song.
Yeah.
And it just wound up being the perfect kind of template for that, putting it through the Khemmis machine. It's a song that's fun, that's high energy, that people love, and it's just really, really memorable.
And I imagine you already used the word fun. It must have been a lot of fun trying to, I say, put your stamp, the Khemmis sound, the signature style, onto a song that is so iconic.
Yeah, it really was. And some of it was pretty simple, like putting it in, one of our standard keys. I think Dio's version is in standard tuning, maybe a half step down, and we tune all the way down to A sharp. So, that instantly gives it a sludgier kind of sound. We don't have keyboards, nor do we really know anyone who plays keyboards. So it seemed pretty obvious to make that keyboard line, a harmony guitar lead. But in terms of the sort of structure of the vocal performance, the vocal harmonies, and then really I think the most noticeable departure is the guitar solo section itself, where in the original Vivian Campbell is soloing over just an iteration of the main riff, and Phil had the idea of let's play it double time and put this punk beat behind it, and let's really kick it up a notch to sort of put our stamp on it, as it were, which I was all about. I was like, yes, let me solo over this double time.
Yeah.
And with that solo, I really wanted to pay tribute to what Vivian Campbell had done, because it's a legendary solo. It's so good.
Yeah.
But playing it straight would be so boring. I think that a 100% straight cover is so uninteresting because it equates to basically karaoke at that point.
Yeah.
And so what I did is I learned his solo, and then I rewrote it section by section, thinking about, okay, well, this is what he played. Now, what would I have done to sort of convey these same kind of emotions, or to get the same sort of technique in there, but the way that I would do it? And so if you look at it musically, if you sit down with the guitar and you play one and then you play the other, you'll see the connections between the two, but it wound up sounding like a pretty distinct guitar solo, which I'm really proud of. And I like the idea that if he heard it, Vivian Campbell would be pretty stoked on it too.
Yeah, I imagine it nails what we on the site like when it comes to our covers, which is that air of originality, but make it your own thing. So I don't just think I'm listening to Dio.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not just about that track either, though. The 3 live recordings, were they specifically chosen in that they were the best sounding, or was there a more convoluted process to picking those tracks?
I mean, that's certainly part of it. We recorded a performance, or rather 2 performances here in Denver. We did a thing we called 2 nights of doomed heavy metal.
Yeah.
This was back at the end of 2018. And we did a sort of 2-night residency here in Denver. And the first night we played all of our slow and low songs. Second night we played all of our up-tempo, sort of more aggressive songs. And we recorded both of those nights with the help of Dave Otero, who's our longtime producer, as well as our friend Chris Lemos, who's a guitarist and front of house sound guy. And as we listened through the tracks, we certainly wanted to make sure that we picked the songs that we played the best on, but we also wanted to make sure that we had a song from each album.
Yeah.
Because this release is sort of our capstone to our relationship with 20 Buck Spin. After this, we are, worldwide on Nuclear Blast, but we would not be where we are without 20 Buck Spin. And so in that sense, we definitely knew we wanted to have the Bereaved on there. That was the first song we wrote as a band that sounded like Khemmis. We'd written other songs before that, but that one was where we started to really figure out what we were. And then Bloodletting and Three Gates worked out quite nicely because for the last few tours, we have played those songs back to back as they are on the recording. And it really was nice that they were both really good takes. So we didn't have to, sort of figure out any way to combine the tracks. And those songs always, really get people moving live. Three Gates in particular, we're not a speed metal band or anything. And yet without fail, almost every time we play that song, a sizable mosh pit will open up. And a doom metal mosh pit always kind of makes me laugh a little bit, but it's also so awesome as a performer.
If it's infecting people, driving them wild enough, that's what they feel they want to do, it's always going to be a good thing.
Absolutely.
The EP seems to be crossing so many territories, as you say. So it's a swan song for $20 spin. It's something for the fans with a cover, some rarer tracks, the live stuff, but also, I guess, is a great introduction to new people who realistically are probably going to come to this EP based off Rainbow in the Dark and then get a real taste, a wider array of your sound.
We certainly hope so. I mean, I won't lie. Like, picking a very well-known song, part of the intent there is to bring in a wider fan base, and it seems to be working. A lot of people, have told us that they found us because of that, and then not only do they get these other studio tracks, but then they get a little taste. I like the idea of a little sample of what that live experience is like, because we pride ourselves on being a live band.
Yeah.
I think any band worth their salt should be, no matter how good they are in the studio, they should be better live. And every night we're on stage, we are up there selling every second of it because we believe in what we do. And I think that it comes through on the recordings. And so hopefully people will hear these recordings and say, oh man, as soon as this nightmare pandemic is over, I've got to see Khemmis live.
Yep, you're absolutely right. Live, I want to feel like I'm there. And that comes across wonderfully with the tracks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, we're really pleased with how that came out, and we really can't thank Dave Otero enough for really capturing that live energy while also making it sound like a professional recording. He is a true wizard at what he does, and that's why we always record with him.
Brilliant. So other than the EP released, everything's on hold right now, right? You have some dates later in the year, but I guess it's just waiting, right?
Yeah, we have no idea what's happening with anything at this point, and it's very frustrating it's frustrating to have to cancel tours, but it's also in its own way even more frustrating to not know what's happening with dates that are already announced. We've got some tours that have not been announced, and we're sort of waiting to see if we should even announce them. Are they going to be rescheduled? There's a lot of hurry up and wait here, and that has been that frustration is compounded by the fact that we can't even all get together and play music together right now, which is maddening.
Is it a matter of just trying to work through across Skype or via phone, or are you just leaving it for now?
I mean, we've tried. I've got a list of some new things for us to try in the coming week. We've tried Skype, Zoom, and Jam Kazam in the last couple of weeks, and none of them were remotely feasible. The lag was just so bad that, and even with just me and Phil, we'd have a metronome going. After a 4 count, one of us would start playing, but the other one, we wouldn't hear the other one for like a half a second, and it would just be this horrible off-time nonsense.
Yeah.
So we're gonna try some other stuff, but thus far it really is just a matter of writing ideas on our own and sort of stockpiling them for when we're able to all get together again.
Yeah. And it's a real shame about the tours. You were obviously going to be coming to Europe, and you're going to be in London. You were going to be in London for Desert Fest. We were gutted that got cancelled, but such is life.
Yeah, we were so excited about that, and I mean, I suppose that's the way it goes. The kind of upside, I guess, is that tour has already been rescheduled for next spring. So at the very latest, we'll finally make our UK debut in I think March is when that tour is happening.
21.
Hopefully something will happen and we're able to come before then. I don't know, but yeah, we were excited. The entire Nuclear Blast UK office was also gutted when it got canceled because none of them have been able to see us, and they were all so excited. And then when the tour got pulled, they were quite heartbroken.
Okay, Ben, thank you very much for your time. I got one more question, and I guess that if you want to talk about this, I was reading up and looking around your social media and so on, and I came across your GoFundMe campaign. Do you want to talk about that briefly?
Sure, yeah. And thank you for asking. Our sweet basset girl, Daisy May, was diagnosed with lymphoma just over a month after our other dog, Patton, died of cancer. And, we were already heartbroken at the loss of Patton. And then when we got this news, it was just devastating. And the oncology group at the animal hospital in town said that, there was a chemotherapy available that, although incredibly expensive, it had a very, very high success rate and would, as much as you can promise anything in medicine, would likely give her quite a long time with us yet, and in a happy and healthy capacity. Unfortunately, that treatment cost a tremendous amount of money. But we said, what's money? You can't take it with you. So we began the chemotherapy and launched a GoFundMe, which people can hunt up. We have raised, between the GoFundMe and some direct donations, we have raised about 60, maybe 70% of the cost of her chemotherapy. And then to bridge the remaining gap, I'm selling some pieces of musical gear from my personal collection. I've sold a guitar and some pedals already, a guitar that was played on Hunted and Desolation, some pedals, and I'll be listing a few more guitars, an amplifier or two, and some more pedals in the coming week or so to help us make sure that we can keep sweet Daisy May happy and healthy as long as possible.
Best wishes, man. I absolutely hope it works out for you.
Well, thus far, it's been great. She just completed her 4th week of chemotherapy, and it turns out dogs respond to chemo way better than humans. When we think about chemo in humans, we think about losing hair and being very gaunt. And she looks better than she has in a long time. Her doctor is thrilled with how she's doing. I mean, we're really early in the process. She's got, I think, 22 remaining sessions of chemotherapy ahead of her. So it's a long road, but we're feeling optimistic. And I just have to say that the response to the GoFundMe so far has been overwhelming. So many Khemmis fans have donated, $1 here, $20 there, and shared stories about what our music means to them, have shared stories with me about their dogs and cats and loved ones who have battled cancer. And the response has just really been incredibly overwhelming and very heartening and empowering.
It's fantastic. It's very humbling to hear. And I'm so pleased it's gone that way.
Yes,
Ben,
absolutely.
Ben, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to let you go. Best of luck with the release tomorrow. And hopefully in a couple of months' time, see you live in London.
That sounds great. Absolutely. Let's all keep that positive mental attitude. And we can't wait to come over and bring our doomed heavy metal to the masses in the UK.
Thank you very much for watching. You can check us out on gbhbl.com as well as on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and Tumblr. Go to Patreon to help us out over there. That's patreon.com/GBHBL, as well as Big Cartel, where you can find some of our merchandise. We have a podcast running on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts. And of course, if you like this video, do us a favour, hit the subscribe button and help the channel grow. Games, horror and heavy metal. What else is life for?